So today we're going to learn a little bit more about your database, and I kind of struggled on putting together today's training on exactly how I wanted to do this. So I'm going to do things a little differently, so bear with me, and hopefully technology plays nice. We're going to start with a little PowerPoint and just kind of have a discussion, but then we're going to actually go to the release site and go through some scenarios of how you might use your database directly to help answer, questions or to solve those puzzles that come up when we're working with within the system. So let's get started. Let's see if I can get my mouse to work. We'll get going. So understanding your database. So what is a database? Well, it's a collection of information that's organized in a very specific manner so that a computer can, grab that data and present it. So when you think about your system, whether it's the online application, the professional development system, the volunteer portal, or the employee records management, it's just a giant database. And the programmers have made some pretty screens for people to add information to the database, and that's all it is. And so when it comes to answering questions about what's going on and stuff, we always go straight, Deb and I especially, go straight to the database to really get an idea of why something might not be displaying right or why something looks goofy. So your database can be your best friend. Whenever we get a call about a user account being silly, or not playing nice, Deb and I know exactly which tables we look at first to kind of paint a picture of what's going on. So my hope today is to get you familiar with the tables within your database. I actually made a little sheet that I'll email out to you that kind of lists the different tables and which portal they align with and kind of a brief description of what the table's for. So that's kind of the plan for today. All right. So if you have the system manager role, you, in essence, have access to the tables within your database. And so to access them, you hover over that System Manager tab, and you would select the first item on the list, which is the database info. And it's going to take you to a screen that looks really similar to this. And all of your tables are going to be shown below, and you have the ability to search by name, just like anywhere else that your system, to find the table you're looking for. I like to remind people that not what I'm showing on the screen today you may or may not see because the tables that are available to you are dependent on which portals you're using. So if you're using all 4 systems, you're going to see every table, but if you're only a professional development district, you're only going to see the shared tables that are linked to the shared tables that are used by ProDev and other systems, and the tables that are specific to professional development. So don't freak out if when you look at your database it looks a little different than the samples we're showing you today. So I just like to add that. And like I said, you can search for a specific table by typing in that little table name field. So if you know that you want the table that has to do with references, you could start typing reference, and it's going to show you any tables that word is contained in, and hopefully help you find the tables you're looking for a little easier. So like I said, each district's going to see different tables based on which portal or portals they're using. Any data that you add to your site ends up in one of the tables associated with your database. So anytime you input data, doesn't matter where you are in the system, data ends up in a table. The tricky part is knowing which table to look in to find the data. And so that's what we're going to try to spend a little time today, is hopefully getting you familiar with where to go to find things. And that's like the document I created that I'll send out at the end of the webinar today. The database operates just like those export info reports. If you want to open them, a table, and actually look at the data inside, you start by clicking on the magnifying glass. And then once you've opened it, it opens in a second window. You can filter away to your heart's delight to try to find the data you're looking for. Some tables that I really want you guys to pay attention to, and that I think are some of the most important tables for you to be aware of are listed here. So users is probably the #1 table that you should get used to. And that is the table that whenever anybody creates an account, they're added to that users table. It's going to show their email address, their first name, their last name, their display name, and a couple other fields. I can't remember, but we'll go look at it in a little bit. Another really important table to get familiar with is the personnel table. And this table is used by 3 out of 4 of our portals. It's used in the job system, the professional development system, and employee records. And that table is the table where a user's location is stored, or locations, because we can give them up to 3 locations, and their position. And the reason it's important, you guys know, especially if you have hiring managers and you want to give them access to see applicants at their building, they're going to need to have a location, because if that table has a blank field there, that's going to cause problems when they go looking to view the data. That's why I want you guys to be aware of that table. It also is key in professional development, not just for their location, but there's a lot of things that that location is fed into for limits, how they appear on reports, all sorts of stuff like that. And there's actually more data in that table as well, and we'll look at a sample from that table in just a moment as well to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. If you have the JAS, or the job system, you're going to want to get to understand the applicant table. This table is where people do not get added to this table, well, I'll say that, until after they've selected their interest type and done their disclosure, and then they'll have a record within this table. But this table shows all the interest type or types that they've picked. It's going to have the status, their current status is stored in this table, and a lot of that information that they select on the actual profile tab itself, like the date they completed their disclosure, if they have a disclosure hit, if they've been cleared or if they've not been cleared, the date they submitted their application, if they agreed or disagreed to the submission process. It'll also have, you know, their legal name. It's where that electronic signature gets recorded. And there's a few other things in that table. So that's a good table to be aware of, especially when you have questions like, why is this person on hold and I don't see a disclosure hit? Well, Deb and we automatically check out that table to see, well, is the disagree on submit checked, or what else is going on? So that's how that table can be helpful. And then just like applicant, there's also the volunteer table. Same concept. They get added to this table once they select their interest, the type of volunteer they want to be, and they complete, you know, that profile, so like the disclosure and anything else like that. So those are probably 4 of my favorite tables and most used tables when it comes, especially to support and helping people understand what's going on. Any questions? I guess I should ask that before I go, you know, moving forward. And you all are muted. I just muted everybody automatically when they joined. So feel free to either unmute yourself or hop on that chat feature and type your question out, and I'll read it aloud and then answer it. Okay. So let's stop and looking at the PowerPoint, and let's switch over and actually look at a site and kind of run through a couple examples or scenarios to get you a little more acquainted on how to use that database info. Give me just a second to share my screen. All right. Oops, wrong spot. We don't want to look there yet. Hopefully you can see the release site. We're on the online application portal right now. It doesn't matter which portal you're on. If you have the system manager role, you can access your entire database. You know, where when you're on the jobs portal, you're going to see jobs information or PD, it's related to PD, but that system manager tab is more specific to the whole database as a whole. So I would hover over System Manager, and I'm going to select Database Info. And when my screen decides to load, this is where I said we're doing things a little different and hoping that technology plays nice. Whenever you're on a webinar, I'm using all that bandwidth to send my screen to all of you guys, so it slows down basically my processing speed. So, because when I was practicing today, this was super quick. So let's hope it makes up its mind and loads quick. There we go. Okay. So when you hover over System Manager and select Database Info, it's going to show you all the tables that you have that are part of your database. And you'll notice, like on my example, I've got over 200 tables I can look at. And you're going to be like, ah, how do I manage all that? I'm going to send you a document, so don't worry. So let's look at, let's come up with a scenario. One way that going to the database could be helpful is oftentimes we get emails or phone calls from someone trying to complete a reference for an applicant, and things aren't working. They can't get the reference to open or whatever. What I like to do when I hear from you guys that someone's struggling with that, I like to go directly to the table to see what's going on. So the first thing I might do is I would go to the users table and find out the ID number of the applicant in question. So I'm going to go, and I've filtered down to find the table because I know it contained the word users. And I'm going to go in, and I know that this particular applicant's first name is Bernice, so I'm going to go look and see if I can find her. And there she is. And here is what the users table looks like. You'll see right away there's their user ID, their username, first name, last name, email address, display name. This is also if you can tell if you've set their password to be updated, whether they've done it or not. So if this was checked, it means that they're being forced to update their password and they haven't done it yet. But as you can see, this person, that's not true. And you can also see when their account was created and the last time they made changes to their account. And you even can see which IP address they've logged into, which if you there. So I've got Bernice's ID number now. She's 1321, and I'm going to copy that ID number because I want to need it in the next table. So now I want to go and look at the reference data that she's entered. And that particular table is called Applicant References. So these are references that the applicant has entered. And that's how I remember that. And I'm going to open that table. And you'll see there's a lot of data here. Well, since I know this applicant's user ID number, if I enter that number in this field, it's going to filter the list to just the records that belong to her. And as you can see, she's only added one app reference so far. And right away I can see under reference date that there's no date there, so that means it hasn't been completed yet. And so I'm talking with the person the reference who's trying to fill it out, and they're telling me, you know, it just won't open. So the first thing I would find out is what reference ID are they entering. And I can see right here that if they're not putting in 111, they'll never get this form to open. So that's the first thing I check. And then the next thing I check is I like to check what email address they're entering on their screen. And so I'm going to scroll over to the email field, and I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see it. And I would ask them what email address they've been entering. And if they tell me a different email address than what's in the table, that's going to tell me right away that that's the problem. The references are specifically designed to only open the form if they have the correct reference ID number and the correct email address. Otherwise, it won't open. And so oftentimes, an applicant might send the email to the person's work email address, but when they go to complete it, they put in their personal email address. So it's a mismatch. It doesn't connect, and so it can't open. So once you've kind of figured out what's going on and you know, oh, their email address is wrong, then you have the option to either shadow the applicant and update it, or you know, tell the reference, say, oh, well, you're entering the wrong one. Could you enter this one instead? And it'll open. And you can assure them that it really doesn't matter what email it was sent to. It's not, we're not going to send, I mean, sometimes people worry about it being their work email. You know, if you want to change it, you can, it's whatever. So that's an example of how you might use the database. Let's go look at another one. A question that Deb and I get often is, I had an applicant and I know they applied for this job, but when I pulled up the job today, they're no longer listed. Well, we give applicants the ability to cancel or to remove themselves from a job that they've applied to up until the closing date of that job. So once it's closed, they can't do it anymore, but if it's an open job and they've changed their mind, maybe they've decided they got a job somewhere else and they just don't want to be considered anymore, they have the ability to do that. And we keep records of all that in the system. So it's just knowing, like I said, which table to go to. There is a table called Applicant Jobs Applied. So if I were to open that table and enter the job ID number of the job in question, it's going to do its fancy thinking and it's going to filter my data down. And I'm going to get a list of everybody who applied for that job. But I'm also going to be able to see if anybody has removed themselves from the job. So I can see right away that this Carrie Flores did indeed remove herself from the job. So that would be why she's no longer showing up and I can't see her. And if you were to, another little field that's interesting is, if you were to go and complete a job recommendation for this job and actually hire one of these people into the job, eventually there'll be a check mark in this hired box of whomever was hired into the job. So that's just another little table you could look at for information. All right, let me think here. Where do I want to go next? I'm going to show you. I've created, I don't know if this will be of any help to you or not, but I'm going to email it out. I didn't put every table in your system, but I put the ones that I thought would be most helpful. And so you'll notice it's going to have the list of all the tables, or the tables that I put into this list. It's going to tell you kind of which portal they belong to, and then a very brief description of, of what that table's for. So I will be sending that out to everybody when we're done today. Okay, so let me think. Hey, Deb, I know you're on the line, and if you want to unmute yourself, do you have any other ideas of good examples that might be helpful to show? She may be on the call with somebody, so. Well, if you get this, Deb, let me know, but I'm going to go and show one more table because I talked about how I thought the personnel table was an important table to be acquainted with. Oops, help if I spelled it right. I'm going to just show you what the personnel table looks like. So if I were to open the personnel table, it's going to be a list of anybody on my system that has a record in this table. So how they get in this table, there's a couple ways it happens. If someone creates a professional development account, and once they complete that first page of my profile, or is it what it's my records, personal information, the system adds them to this table. When you hire someone through the system, they get added to this table. And actually, I think if after an applicant completes the entire checklist, they're actually added to this table as well. That's why we always tell you with hiring managers that they need to complete their profile so that we can add a location to them so that they can actually see people. And then employee records, when they have an account and they're given a location, they're added to this table as well. So that this is an important table. You'll also, you'll see their first name and last name and their email listed in this table. But you'll also see, if we scroll over here, you can see what district they're assigned to. This is helpful and important if you're a cooperative district, our cooperative system where you have more than one district sharing a database. Also used a lot for our professional development districts. When you want to, when people create their account, they choose which district they're associated with. And usually we have the district who's, subscribed to the portal, but we make usually another option for like people that are outside of the district. So you can quickly differentiate between who belongs to your district and who's not an employee. And you'll see this is where their location gets added. And if they have more than one, there's location 1 and location 2. And then if they have a position, this is where that position gets stored. And there's a few other fields. Also where if you are using the professional development system to upload data into a different system, this is where their name key data gets stored. So it's a good table to be aware of. Okay, let me go back to our PowerPoint and see if I'm missing anything. Hold on just a second. I'm going to pause sharing for just a second. Okay. All right, let me go back to sharing. So I've showed you kind of where to view data and how to find data in the system. And you can see, like, you can look at any table here and, you can kind of connect the dots to what belongs to what. If you're someone who's familiar with using Access and you want to make a query, you have the ability to do that. And I'm just going to show you what it looks like. If you want to learn how to use Access, I can show you, not today, but basically you can export any of the tables from your database and then import them into Access and then connect tables together. Because like when we looked at the personnel table, you noticed like the location was a number. So at looking at that, I don't know what, location number 13 is unless I went and opened the location table and I looked up what 13 is. And I come down here and I'm like, oh, 13 is the hometown professional development. Okay. So when you write a query, so to speak, you're going to connect fields from different data, from different tables in your database, and then you can have a report that I guess is a little more, I don't know what the right word is, but you can connect the data and fill in the blanks, and you can compare stuff from one field to another, or you can like say of my users, who has this, and it'll look at a different table. So I'm going to show you an example. I have Access open on my machine, and I already have tables imported in so that I can just go in and I could create a report, a query of whatever I choose. So I'm going to make a pretty simple query. I'm going to take that personnel table, sorry for the scrolling, and I'm going to connect it to my locations table. And might as well, while I'm here, put my positions in there as well. I'm going to close this. And since I've got mine already set up, it already knew to connect the fields. So if I were doing this on your machine, you would put the tables you want to look at. You need to connect them by a common thread. And for personnel, my location ID, you'll see location ID, and the location ID that's stored in the locations table, or that that joining item, they're the same in either table. And same with positions. I would connect position ID to position ID so that those tables know how to communicate and connect data. And so then I could just simply pick what I want in my query. So I might want to know the user's ID number. Maybe I want their first name, their last name, and I think I want to know their email. I don't really care about the district because I already know the district, but I want to know what location they're assigned to, and I don't want the number. So I could come in here, and I know in this particular table, the description is actually the long name of the location. And what else do I want to know? Well, I know that they've got a position ID stored in this table, so maybe I want to know what the name of the position is that they're assigned to, and I could keep picking anything I wanted, like I want that exchange ID to show up, I could put that in here as well. And then I would run my query. And now I have a list. I basically have my personnel table, but instead of codes, I've got the actual data, the name or whatever you want to call it. So I could see right here, here's Mary is user 12, and here's her email address, and this is the location she's assigned to, and this is the position that she has, and she does not have an exchange ID loaded in the system. So that's an example of one query that you could write by taking the two different tables and connecting them. Let me think of another good example. Maybe you want a list of your employees. So since I'm familiar with the table, I'm going to just kind of create something real quick. I know that I need my users. So I'm going to take my users table. And then I want to know who has the employee role. So I need that user's role data. So I have a table that contains which role belongs to whom. And since I can't remember what the role codes are, I'm actually going to throw the roles table in there as well. And like I said, I have mine set up so it knows to connect and link my tables automatically. So for this table, the users table, I connected it with the user ID and user roles. And then my common thread between the roles table and the user roles is that role ID. Then I could come in here and create another table. I could say, okay, I want to know their user ID number. I want to know their first name. I want to know their last name. Email doesn't hurt. And I want to be able to see what roles they have. And I want to know the name of the role. And I want to know which portal the role's on. So I could run this report, and I could see all these people, all the different roles. I could sort this by individual. And so I've got who has which role. Well, you know, if I'm only interested in the employee role, you know, well, maybe I need to, you know, I don't want to look at all the others. So I'm going to set some parameters within my query to whittle down this information. So I'm going to go back and look at my query, and I'm only interested in who's an employee on the jobs portal. So that's portal 1. So I'm going to switch to that. And I can look at it and I'm like, okay, that thins my list down. But I want to know who's an employee. Well, okay, employees role 25. So I only want it to show me role 25. And I can run my query again. And now I've got a list of everybody on my system that has that role. And then I could decide, oh, I'm missing a bunch of people. I need to go update their accounts or whatever. So when you guys contact support and you want information, basically this is what Deb and I do, or Sherry, whomever's helping you. We take your tables and we write queries to connect the different tables together to provide you with a list or a report of the information you want. So that's how we do it. You know, and if I didn't want this role number to show up, because that doesn't mean anything to the person I'm going to give the report to, but I needed it to help me filter my data. I could come in and I could remove it. It's still there, but it's just not visible anymore. And now I've got a list of my employees, the employees that are part of the jobs portal. Okay. Any questions? I know I haven't been paying attention to the chat, but do you guys have any questions about the database? We can go back and look at some more examples. If you guys have some scenarios that you want to look at together, we could kind of walk through how we would get that information. So feel free, just put something in chat and we can do that. I'll go back to the test, to our release site real quick. You know, and nobody has any questions, that's fine too. Deb, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm still here.
Do you have any good examples that we could show, or that you could think of would be helpful?
Probably not helpful. It would probably be more confusing.
Well, if you can think of anything, I was just trying to think of some, you know, examples that might be helpful. I'd like to add, you can open and look at any table. You can't actually make changes to the database directly. We don't let you, because we've had problems where clients have deleted key information. So you can't hurt anything by coming here and looking. So I encourage you to do that. And it's really kind of interesting. The more you start to play with the database and make those connections of where the data lives, it's kind of cool, because you can, you know, learn a lot and find out some pretty neat stuff. I always tell people that your system's a database, so any data that you collect can be brought out and reported on, or, you know, can be pulled out and put into a pretty report, so to speak. And because of that, there's so much data in here. You know, right now, if you go to any of the reports menus, you know, you're pretty limited on what you see. And, you know, at that time, you know, but if there's data you want, we can help write those queries and pull that data out for you or show you how to do it. So like the query I just was showing you in my example, if there's things like that that are helpful that we could create really quickly for you, the nice thing is once Deb and I have written a query, we can send our query to our programmers, and then they can add that query to your export information. So, you know, if you want to work with us and kind of get your report down to exactly how you want it to look, and once we've got this figured out, then we send them the query language, and we can add that to your menu here so that you have access to that report at any time. So that's kind of how that works, and that's how those reports end up here. Those are just queries that we've written, whether it's us or the programmers. So when you're on your system, if there's information you consistently would like to have access to, let us know. And, you know, queries are easy to write and to put onto your system. The actual reports on the reports menu are fancy queries that have been formatted a little differently. You know, and so that's why we can also add custom things there as well. But that's really all I had planned. Like I said, I kind of struggled. Okay, yes, Kim has a question. Let me read Kim's question real quick and then I'll answer it. Okay, if you see no data, check to see if there's a filter stuck. If you see this little green circle thing, and you might not have anything typed in there, but it's blank, if you click on that, see if that refreshes your screen and shows you your data. Sometimes if you've had the screen open too long, it'll time out and it'll kind of remove everything. Or you were filtering, yay, good. You were filtering on a different page somewhere in the system and it kind of, that filter got stuck. So that's an excellent question. So thank you for asking that. So yes, anytime there's a green circle refresh button, it means there is some type of filter in play in that field. So you just clear it and all your data should reappear. Any other questions?